like to welcome Sanjiv Nathwani and Sanjiv Agrawal to be here with us. Sanjiv Nathwani is a transformation leader in banking and capital markets with prior senior roles at Deloitte, Goldman Sachs, and Freddie Mac. He's a strategic advisor to fintechs focused on process transformation, low-code, no-code development, and artificial intelligence. With him, we have the Executive Director of Change Mobilization at JP Morgan, Sanjiv Agrawal. Sanjiv has driven strategic change across investment banking, custody, asset and wealth management, and insurance businesses. At JP Morgan, Sanjiv leads a business process and decision management center of excellence and product owns task and workflow management systems. Prior to his current role, Sanjiv led the business architecture and technology strategy group at Goldman Sachs and was a principal in the financial services industry practice at Diamond Management and Technology Consultants, which is now PwC. They are going to have a discussion about how operational excellence and operational agility are evolving in these times of rapid change and uncertainty in financial services. I am very much looking forward to that discussion. I ask the audience while they're having that discussion to pose your questions, because in the last 10 minutes, I'm gonna bring your questions to both of them. And ladies and gentlemen, this is as good as it gets when it comes to financial services leadership. And I'm very honored and happy to have Sanjiv Nathwani and Sanjiv Agrawal with us. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our global audience today.
Jose, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you, BTOES, and thank you, Signavia, for sponsoring this particular presentation. Jose, as you've said, we live in interesting times, to say the least, and in banking, we live, I think, in especially interesting times. If it wasn't enough to be contending with digitizing everything and fundamentally redesigning client experience, trying to keep up with fintech and industrializing our operations, we now have to fundamentally rethink our organizations and operating models in light of the pandemic. With all the incessant and relentless change, it sure seems like agility has become a very large part of operational excellence. So it gives me great pleasure today to be interviewing Sanjiv Agrawal, who's at the very forefront of that at JPM in asset and wealth management. He's helping them rethink operational excellence in the face of almost continuous transformation. So here's how we're going to play the game today. I get to ask Sanjiv 4 questions with the occasional debate breaking out because we can't help it. And then we will hand back to Jose to field some questions from you in the audience. Hopefully that makes sense. We leave about 10 minutes for that. So Sanjiv, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to you for some opening remarks.
Sure, thanks. So first of all, thanks, Jose, for the introductions. And thanks, Sanjiv Nathwani, for inviting me to participate in this chat today. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Sanjiv Agrawal from JP Morgan. I do need to do a quick disclaimer before we move on. Any personal views or opinions that I share today are my own and not from my employer. Just building on Jose's introduction, I've spent the last 20 years in transformation and change roles in financial services. And over that time, I've seen operating environment evolve significantly, as well as the notion of operational excellence. And it's really because of that much of my focus over the past decade has been on developing organizational capabilities that help improve operating leverage and accelerate change. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion today on moving from operational excellence to operational agility. So with that, I'll hand it to you, Sanjiv. Yes, the other Sanjiv. Let's get started. Hi, I'm not able to hear the audio. Can folks?
Sorry, does that, hopefully yes. That works. Okay, thank you. So, you know, I was saying you're the far more erudite one and the, and so, that's how you tell the difference between us. Well, let's get going. So question number 1, how do you think the notion of operational excellence has evolved over the last few years in your experience? How do you think risk and control now balanced with cost efficiency, client satisfaction, revenue enablement today?
I'd say kind of on how ops excellence has evolved. It used to be that if you execute consistently and reliably, all the rest of it would kind of work itself out. Your clients would be happy, your revenues would reflect that, but that's changing. I think the first thing I'd say is just executing consistently and reliably is more challenging today. The operating environments at large banks have grown more complex. We've globalized our footprints. We've scaled business volumes. We've diversified the products and services that we need to support. And so from an operational perspective, the new normal for large banks is managing processing across many lines of businesses, many specialized functions, locations, and time zones. You add on top of that clients are becoming more demanding because they know what's possible. They experience it in other industries, like when they order something from Amazon or when they drive their Teslas, and they want that same type of stuff, those experiences, when they bank. So, what I think we're starting to see is really operations folks are really becoming the voice of feasibility. And that's because they know how to navigate complexity at scale. They're the people that are at the coalface when implementing change. Ops people speak business, ops people speak tech, and they're in the details. And because of that, we're seeing greater ops involvement being demanded by the business in support of, either in support of or to outright drive front to back transformation. And I think the definition of operations excellence is now more inclusive of the ability to transform. Kind of hitting your point around, balancing risk, cost, and client satisfaction. It's something that we used to refer to as a triple constraint triangle, right? You can trade off risk versus cost versus client satisfaction when optimizing your processes. But that was really more true when the work had to be performed manually. You don't really have to do that anymore. With automation, we can optimize on multiple dimensions. It takes work and good design, but it can definitely be done.
Sanjiv, you're so right. Thank you for that. But let's add on, right? So how do you think the pandemic is influencing these priorities? Is that shifting it one more time? How strongly does digitization, the virtualization of work, and as we've been talking about today, operational agility feature into your priorities?
I think most people, or at least many people on this call today, would probably agree that the pandemic has been the single largest accelerant to the ops digitization agenda in years. It's essentially forced people into digital literacy, whether you're a client, a counterparty, or a person delivering a product or service. Historical adoption frictions to a virtualized operating model kind of fell away to necessity. And what we saw was almost overnight, firms needed to enable a nearly fully remote working environment. They had to create instrumentation to monitor the plant so that we knew how it was running. And they had to digitize all of their, or many of their paper-based processes. So I think what we've seen is that COVID has really highlighted the importance of operational agility. And, and kind of in the spirit of never letting a crisis go to waste, I think we need to build on that momentum to continue to drive the overall digitization agenda.
Thank you, Sanjiv, and you're so right. Never let a crisis go to waste. Those are the pivot points. So staying with that, how do you think the approach to process transformation has evolved? You said that operations is now, the identity has changed increasingly to transformation. How do you think that's evolved over the last few years? And how do you think traditional capabilities like Lean Six Sigma, Kaizen, BPM, workflow automation come together with the newer capabilities like model-driven development, low-code, no-code, robotics, AI? There's an alphabet soup out there. How does that all come together?
It's certainly a big landscape of stuff that's coming at us, right? Like I do think the biggest thing that I think is evolving lately is there's just been a ton of activity in tools. The palette of powerful tools are evolving quickly, and they're really broadening what they can do to support the whole life cycle of process transformation, all the way from discovery through implementation. And I think the challenge is becoming more how to figure out how to use all these things in concert and in an effective way. It takes a lot of time and focus to leverage them to max effect. I'll describe a few of the areas that I think are really, that have some compelling potential to really transform how we transform processes. And there's a few categories, and I'll just kind of unpack them a bit. Process discovery tools, model-driven development, the evolution of citizen development, so business people developing solutions, and then advances in machine learning and AI. Those are kind of 4 areas that I think are really kind of accelerating, changing, and enhancing our capabilities to transform. So, with process discovery, we see tools that are helping us generate process insights at scale through automated task and process mining capabilities. These are things that we would have tried to measure the hard way. We want to be data-driven in our change, and we want to be able to heat map our world so that we can find the areas that we want to focus on in order to transform. And that's where I think these discovery tools really come into play and can add a lot of value. Model-driven development. This is something that's been pretty established. It's a capability that allows you to model a process or a decision and then directly run what you model on compatible workflow and decision engines. I think the innovation in this space over the last few years has really been in shifting, really enhancing and creating constructs and tools with really, really easy to use interfaces such that these tools are more accessible to business people. So, model-driven development used to kind of live in tech. Now the new tools make it so that a business person can model their process, model their decisions, and then just export it as executable code and run them on compatible infrastructure. And that's really powerful. We see that really kind of improving the handshake between the business and technology and really accelerating cycle times. Citizen development is another area that's changing. That used to mean creating Excel macros and using Access databases, but it's really starting to evolve to include configuring robotic process automations, doing large-scale data and blending and analytics tools with some general purpose tooling, all the way to configuring apps themselves in no-code and low-code tooling. And then on the machine learning and AI front, we're just seeing those advances further push out the automation frontier and opening up creative solutioning opportunities. You could only get so far with declarative rules that you're trying to automate, but machine learning and AI start to really kind of open up what you can automate and create new experiences for your clients. On the kind of alphabet soup point around, around how all these things come together, I'd say that, things like Lean Six Sigma, Kaizen, traditional BPM, they all remain as relevant as ever. However, the things that are closer to implementation, really that kind of help you actually build the solution, model-driven development, low-code, bots, and AI, I think that those things help unconstrain the possibilities when you're solutioning and can help you deliver it faster, right? So many on this call will have seen bots get developed and released into production within days. I've, in my personal experience, seen model-driven development approaches get us 40% cycle time improvements, for the areas that it's focused on. And, I believe, that the potential of low-code and no-code tooling could go well beyond that in terms of acceleration. I think in order for all of this stuff to come together, your traditional process engineers, right? So the people that are doing Lean Six Sigma, Kaizen, traditional BPM need to become really savvy with these new capabilities, and they need to take more direct ownership of implementing their own change. I really do think that there's going to be some blurring of ops and tech roles in this space, and people need to get used to it or they'll get left behind.
That's very insightful, Sanjiv, and I couldn't agree more. And you're touching on it, but could you expand a little bit on how does the rate of change and the speed of transformation required modify the way you think about process transformation? How do you think it changes the way we think about resiliency? Because it's all about speed and shortening the cycle, as you've been saying.
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, Sanjiv. I think, from a rate of change perspective, I think it is going to be difficult for people to keep up, right? We no longer have a tools bottleneck, right? In a way, we're almost spoiled for choice with all the stuff that's emerging, albeit some of it is at early stages of maturity, to be fair. But what I feel like we're running into is a bit more of a human capability bottleneck. I think we need more people that know how to put it all together, how to solution this stuff, and that have the specialized skills and spend the time, learning some of these techniques and capabilities deeply. And that's why I think it's important to focus on capability development within your organization. I think that if you have the right people with the right skills, tools, methods, and governance, you can deploy them quickly, responsibly, and safely. And I mentioned governance in particular because we are seeing that blurring of ops and tech roles, and we are empowering business people to drive some of their own technical change. And I think governance is a key part of that, just to make sure that we're doing it safely and that the solutions are going to be resilient.
Yeah, I'm just projecting forward and thinking, how does this all change when one level further, as you introduce things like the Internet of Things, and you're really designing for machines talking to machines as much as you're talking human to machine interface. That brings me to the next question. So clearly, the transformation game itself is changing, with implications for all of us and how we should participate, and what our opportunities are. How do you think the game changes in the next 5 to 10 years? Can you peer into the future and sort of project that? And specifically, what happens as the banks become increasingly digitized, AI matures, and the pace of innovation accelerates even further?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is that the problems that we try to solve are just going to get more interesting, right? Like as digitization and automation efforts mature in organizations, and as some of the new capabilities that we described help accelerate implementations to the point that we'll be able to transform faster, I think we're just going to be less constrained in our ambition in what we're trying to do from an end goal transformation perspective. We're definitely going to see more front to back emphasis in optimization versus optimizing in silos, which there's a lot of today, right? I think we're going to see less focus on mundane automation and more focus on new and reimagined products and services.
Thanks for that, Sanjiv. And I just want to push a little bit further because you're touching on it, and I think for the audience especially, this is I'm sure it's near and dear to their hearts. So what is the impact of all of this on our operating models, our organizational models, and even talent? You touched on it earlier. Could you expand on that?
Sure. I think, as things get increasingly digitized or automated, we're going to have less operational people serving as actors in a business process, and their roles are going to shift from running the plant to redesigning the plant and implementing the change. And I think kind of the upshot of that is the run the bank, change the bank ratio in the organization shifts in the opposite direction. Transformation becomes the core of what operations does. And I think from a people, like in talent perspective, it's funny, in financial services, the rocket scientists used to be the people that valued the deals or that priced the trades. Now we're finding the need for them in ops. And I think from a talent perspective, ops needs to learn how to recruit, grow, and retain them.
And I'm just going to riff with you a little bit, Sanjiv. I remember distinctly in one of my experiences how we fundamentally changed the recruiting model and the training model. So we went from having sort of a one category or one profile for the analyst class that we were recruiting, but we actually turned it into 4 categories, and that included data scientists, engineers, financial analysts, and then we fundamentally changed the training as well. We sort of insisted on a transformation and a change training right at the get-go, with an emphasis on, to your point, more democratized accountability for change. So it's and so as you progress that 4, 5 to 10 years out, you've got a class of operations professionals who are really the profile is completely different. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they evolve and what they bring to the table. Anyway, that's I think the thing to watch moving forward. You know, and maybe the final question, Sanjiv, and please, you know, let's expand on this some. You know, I'm empowered to give you a magic wand today by BTOES and by Jose. And given that magic wand, what would you wish for to help you achieve your transformation goals moving forward?
Well, look, if you gave me a magic wand today, I'd say I'd wave it. Everyone's 100% vaxxed up. COVID is gone and we're back to normal, right? That'd be my wish. I think, you know, to answer it a bit more in the spirit of what you're probably looking for, and probably at the risk of broadening the tools palette discussion further, you know, one of the things I would like to be able to do is wave that wand and get self-service access to all the data that I need of high quality and described in business language. I think that if we had that, we could dramatically accelerate transformation further. I'd be able to better monitor the plant. I'd be better able to discover new opportunities to better serve the client or to streamline the operation, and would definitely eliminate a key bottleneck in automation initiatives.
So it winds up being about data, and to sort of jump into that conversation with you, it struck me during the pandemic as I was working with different clients that it would have been incredibly valuable to have the ability to gather all the data in whatever shape or form it was into a common palette, a common environment where everyone could view it, you know, together, collaborate, and make sense of it to make some, you know, drive some of the rapid decisions. So this is becomes a game, you know, as we speak about operational agility, of really being able to take, you know, snapshots in time and taking the best information you have, but bringing it together and assembling it to drive what is still the human domain, which is, you know, our ability to, you know, use our judgment to make decisions on how things need to operate in the face of sort of a crisis or dramatic change. And you know, and if I look at the resiliency challenges, a lot of the resiliency challenges were actually getting at the right data in a timely way, but then also being able to ensure that, you know, everyone had the same view of the data, they were speaking the same language, right? So if you needed to make a decision on you know, shutting down a region and moving work to another region, you need to make sure that your description of the process, systems, organizations, all of that had a common view. And then a lot of the benefit of having that kind of data assembled in the right way, you know, having a magic wand, of course, is being able to do what if analysis, right? So really being able to ask the tough questions, say, what if we did this and what if we did that? And so I agree with the data is the final frontier. And so, you know, maybe your thoughts on is, you know, if you had all the right data, what's the, you know, what would you do with it? You know, how would that, you know, experience change in operations and day-to-day flow and in urgent, you know, urgent situations?
I mean, I think for me, that acts really, and it's not just data, right? It's understanding that data in context, right? Having the information and knowledge, right? That that the data supports, I think will make, you know, will allow us to have data-driven decision making. You know, for me, a big part of my focus is automation, and you know, I need two things in order to automate. I need to be able to codify the algorithm that lives in someone's head or in a procedure that, you know, that does the thing that I'm trying to automate, and I can do that with, you know, decision modeling, something that we referenced earlier, you know, or I can do that with, you know, more advanced things like machine learning or AI. But I also need the data to input into the algorithm, right? So I need both pieces of that equation in order to really solve the problems that I want to solve.
Thank you for that. You know, Sanjiv, with that, I have a feeling, you know, we probably have questions that we might take. And so, you know, as I wrap up, you know, I want to just, you know, I want to repeat something that someone pointed out to me. It's obvious, it's staring us all in the face, but it is nonetheless insightful, which is as we automate more, as we digitize more, as we employ more and more tools, what we're inadvertently doing is actually, obfuscating our understanding of how things work, and especially the data that is an invisible river flowing underneath us. And so, in coming back to the theme of operational excellence and operational agility, it becomes a game, I think, of also making sure that you're instrumenting everything that you do so that you get the telemetry to manage better and better. And that's often, is missed in the spirit of getting something automated. But, we could go on for a long time, Sanjiv, you and I, and I welcome that opportunity offline. I think I'm going to ask Jose to see if he's got audience participation here, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much, Sanjiv, for being here today and sharing your insights.
Sure thing.
What a great discussion. What a great discussion. Everybody's is listening attentively. Incredible insights both of you are sharing. And the questions have been coming in. And I ask the audience to we have time, so keep submitting your questions. We're going to get to as many of them as possible. In no specific order, both of you are experts in financial services and tremendous leadership track record in the industry, and we benefit from both of your insights. So the first one comes from Anna Martinez in New Jersey. So Anna asks still that there is a, first of all, she says, what a great presentation, what a great discussion. And her commentary, let me expand the box here just momentarily. Her comment is that, why do you think there's still a lot of companies in North America specifically which still have not taken advantage of basic technology like BPM and process mining and even some RPA that has been around for decades, and people still think that, not decades, but certainly within the decade, it has been readily available. But quite a few financial organizations have not taken advantage of those technologies. Any thoughts about why? I joke with some people. I go to some insurance companies that someone is in the background is still printing something on a dot matrix but plotter. So it's like not everybody has kind of advanced to the digital age. So any thoughts about a couple of questions here, really? Why is that it takes so long for certain organizations to adopt certain technologies? And maybe part of that corollary to that is that maybe because they don't see the value is not there yet for them, or they're just not aware of the value capabilities of these technologies?
I can take a first shot at it, and then Sanjiv, I'll hand it to you to kind of add to it. I think I think what we see is a lot, the organizational complexity can make it feel daunting to try to drive some of this change. We're long from the old mainframe days where there was like one machine running your plant. In services industries, we've seen an explosion, right, of apps and services. It's not uncommon for an operations organization to have 500 to 1,000 applications that they're performing their work around. And so when it comes to so I run into kind of, I'll see it either way, right? I'll either say, hey, why do I have 5 different workflow platforms, or why don't I have anything at all, right? So a little bit of it is, people are challenged by a lot of legacy technology, the need to maintain, care, and feed that, a lot of strategic change that they're undergoing at the same time, and it just becomes a relative prioritization problem. I also think that, when you start to look at some of these technologies that are shifting the traditional roles and responsibility in the organization, you run into some impedance, and it can be somewhat political, right? So if I'm introducing bots into my infrastructure, I may run into technologists who are hesitant to have that bot interact with their system, or organizationally we may be hesitant to have a business person construct that bot because, well, they didn't go to MIT and they weren't trained in, software engineering, and what about the governance and all of those things. So I think there's a lot of, in some places, cultural change around roles, responsibilities, and the overall end-to-end value chain. And then I think it's just people dealing with the complex scenarios that they have in their operating environments and trying to make those trade-off decisions. Sanjiv, like any thoughts to add on that?
Yeah, no, I think just building on that, what I've found in doing transformation work is it is fundamentally an organizational behavior challenge, right? You really have to recondition the organization to think differently, articulate themselves differently, to ask different questions and demand different things of their environment. That's how you drive transformation. And Sanjiv, you referred to this earlier, but there is literally, we are spoiled for tools at this point. And so the ability to get the organization to transform the way it behaves is rate limiting, right? You sort of take on one set of new tools, and you take on another and another and another, and it's you're pivoting battleships, especially in the larger organizations, and each new addition creates both a benefit, but it also creates some risk. I mean, let's face it, operations still is demanded to first and foremost make sure nothing goes bump in the night, and trying to create that stability fights with the need to morph and change. And so it's really about how can you pivot the behavior of the organization, and as I was speaking earlier, change things right at the intake, hire the right kind of people, train them the right way, give them different incentives, performance ratings, rewards and recognition. All of that plays heavily into your ability to absorb change. The second is, let's face it, as much as we all know there's an incredible need to transform, the reality is that the transformation as a percentage of budget, overall budget for technology budget or for change budget in an organization is still small. It is still, something, if you're lucky, you're in the 20-25% range. It's probably less than that at most firms. And so overwhelmingly, the change agenda is being driven by, the business as usual, call it, needs, the expanding into new market, changing, the client experience, innovating new businesses, warding off fintech, as I said, and so on. So, what I've found really works well is pivoting off of the BAU. So, one area of transformation that seems, maybe not intuitive is risk transformation, how controls and risk work itself is being done, being able to overlay transformation on top of that and introducing new capabilities, tooling on top of that. Now you're marrying the, the day-to-day with the need to transform, and it doesn't feel like overhead. You can pivot, with the urgency of that particular agenda. And so, it's again, rate limiting by organizational behavior change.
Yeah, you both have mentioned several very important points there. You talked about the constant flux of change in organizations, especially the larger ones. There's always so many competing priorities, right? And different visions about what the future will look like. If not officially, there's certainly kind of these organic visions that happen. You talk to someone in IT, they will have a vision that will be different, maybe from someone who's in operations and someone who's in the leadership team. So it's hard sometimes to align those, which brings, and then the other component is that there's so many technologies. And again, the right technology is amazing because it can make things go faster, cheaper, better. But the wrong technology can also make stupid happen at the speed of light. So it's like, so how do you decide among those things? Which brings me to the thought of the less talked about items often are not as exciting. And there are things like structure, roles and responsibilities, and governance. I'm curious on your perspectives about what does good look like when the organizations have a good governance in place for not fixing all of these issues, but certainly kind of aligning priorities, selecting what should be focused on. Curious about just your perspectives and what you've seen out there that looks like good practices when it comes to governance.
Sanjiv, you want to take that one first, and then I can follow?
Sure, why not? It's a great question, Jose. It may be at the heart of the success of transformation as well, which is getting that balance right. So what I mean by that is, you know, good change governance is about striking the balance between the central teams and the line teams, right? So it's if you get once you, at the end of the rainbow is this wonderful place where everyone's doing all the right things with all the right tools, but the migration to that is difficult, right? And if you and you know, we're humans and human dynamics come into play. If you drive things to central teams, then it's viewed as an outsider coming in that's just telling you what to do and disrupting your work, and there's a skepticism. Transformation is difficult. If you do it right at the leaf level, which, you know, there's a wonderful bottom-up transformation opportunity, but it can be disjointed, disconnected, not reusable. You wind up with this quilt of you know, well-intended things that don't come together. If you get the governance right, you have the ability to, you know, really drive and steer centrally as you introduce new capabilities, but with the goal of federating it out, so that when you're done, it's actually the capabilities are democratized, broadly used, but consistently used in a controlled way. So thank you for that question, Jose. But Sanjiv, you've got more to say on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think, you know, I'd echo many of the points that you made. Like, I think when you hear governance, you almost think of the opposite of agile, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like, it isn't the opposite of agility. I do think you are agile if your capabilities are sitting at the coalface, spread across the various ops functions in your organization, because that's where people are sensing and responding to their environment. They can recognize patterns and they can self-solve. But, you know, I think what we're seeing with the tools and the capabilities is that they're really wide and they're really deep, and it does require deep specialization. And, you know, people need support structures with teams of, you know, ninjas or green berets that can support them out in the organization. And so I do think, and I think, Sanjiv, this is where you're going, like a hybrid model with specialized centers of excellence that can support decentralized practitioners is the way to make something like this work. And then you can put in the right guardrails. I think, Sanjiv, you mentioned reuse. You know, like, this is how, again, you can drive scale through governance, right? So governance isn't just about slowing things down and making it safer. It's also about design governance, and it's about designing things for reuse so that you can kind of amplify the benefits across the organization. So I think that was a really good call out on Gavi, Sanjiv.
Those are great insights. Thank you so much for that. William Fuller is asking about this. He has a number of different questions, and I'm gonna get some of the themes here. But one of the he talks about someone. It's one thing for someone to implement his or her own change, and quite another to implement a change that crosses organizational boundaries and disciplines. And you have talked about that as you discuss the complexities of even governance. But his question is, how do you see the improvement of such changes evolving, and specifically organization-wide, you know, changes and the discipline behind that? Again, a bit related to the question of governance again, and but when organizations are, very few things are done well company-wide in any company. That's the reality. But if there are few diamonds to be collected, what do you think are some of the insights and or practices to keep in mind when you're doing company-wide organizational change? What are some of the tips that you'd have?
I'll start, Sanjiv, on this one, then I'll hand it to you. I think if when you start to talk about running change at that kind of aperture at a company-wide scale, I think absolutely critical to have the right senior sponsorship, right? So the effort, the mission, you know, like the kind of the energy behind it needs to be underwritten by someone very, very senior. I think, you know, and I'm going to borrow something that I've heard from a previous, you know, you've got to think big, but you need to start small. You need to demonstrate proof of value with whatever it is you're pitching, and then you need to scale fast. And in the experimental phase, right, where we're exploring this new emerging landscape, you also have to fail early and take some stuff off the table, until you find the right solutions that you want to bring in and scale within your organization. So I think sponsorship, starting small, proof of value, and then just kind of building that traction over time. I do believe that this combination of central kind of centers of excellence, but with a heavy emphasis on differentially equipping people in the various business areas with the capability there's some balance there that if you strike the right balance, you'll be able to kind of scale it over time.
Sanjiv, maybe just to build on that, right? So I agree with everything you've said, but what's interesting is the culture of organizations. It is important to understand the culture of your organization. And if you look at the two extremes, the organizations that are very command and control, they're very centrally driven, and there are organizations that are very entrepreneurially driven. If you tried to control them from the top, you couldn't, right? And there's a spectrum in the middle. And understanding your culture and then creating incentives for change in line with the culture also becomes important, and so without a doubt, think big, start small. The question becomes, how do you start small? How do you get that momentum? How do you break that, that inertia, if you will, the inertial friction? And in some cases, you have to do it by fiat. So absolutely, in all cases, having a strong central and steady sponsorship is absolutely vital. But in some cases, you find yourself, because the culture of the organization, doing things by fiat, just to get the ball rolling. In some cases, it's the exact opposite. If you do things by fiat, you risk tissue rejection, and you have to go down and really find the change agents and sort of equip them, and and really strive for the viral effect. Maybe the last one on this point, because you can go on for a while on this point, is there's a demographic shift, right? And so we are in, especially the younger generation that's coming in is very differently equipped than, certainly I am. I've been around a while with all the gray hair, and they are more willing to try things. They're more willing to stumble and fail, and and really enjoy getting their hands dirty and in being involved in the process of transformation. And so really tapping into that becomes absolutely vital. And in the most successful transformations I've seen are ones that not only get breadth of transformation, whatever the the tooling or the capability that you're bringing in, but it's sustainable to the point where people look back and say, well, that's just how we always did things. What's the big deal? To me, that's success, right, Sanjiv? I mean, if people look back and say, hey, this is the way it always was and always will be, you've actually successfully transformed. So it's a matter of, finding what the right wedge in is.
So great insights. We have a very interesting question here. As you look forward to there is this perception that there's no going back to normal. We have not just had a disruption, we have had a dislocation, and on the dislocation you don't ever go back to normal. You're just kind of the continent has drifted a little bit. So with that, what do you see as the biggest threat to financial services in the next in the return to this new normal? Is it fintech? Is it blockchain technology with bitcoins? What do you see in the landscape that is keeping perhaps leadership teams on their toes as they think about the future and viability of financial services across different organizations?
Do you want me to take a crack, Sanjiv, and then pass it back to you? So I'm going to sort of step back and make a statement again from a colleague I really admire. who posited that, you know, traditional strategy work is kind of dead because the world is moving so fast. The ability to do 3 to 5 year strategy, to establish moats, and that, you know, give you a protected space where you can, you know, pick up rents on the asset you create for an extended period of time, that's gone. It becomes, the world is moving so fast. It's a game of exploiting, you know, it's a game of exploiting trends. And so the financial services firms that are able to exploit trends extraordinarily fast and maximize the return from them are the ones that I think are going to succeed. And that ties to operational agility, because if you think about a world that moves that fast, it becomes much more a game of capabilities. The firms that have the capabilities not only to, you know, address a particular market trend, but to reassemble themselves rapidly to exploit a market trend are going to be the winners in that, you know, particular game. So again, I would tie it back to, how do you construct yourself? How do you design yourself? How do you give yourself capabilities that are easy to reassemble and allow you to morph? You know, firms like Amazon do this brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. How do you, at the risk of coining a phrase, you know, Amazonify financial services? I think that therein lies the success. But Sanjiv, I'm sure you've got more to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, you know, I think I agree with some of the things that you said. For me, I think, you know, ensuring that we're focused on the customer, right? We see sort of with digital disruption, you know, the firms that are the most, you know, that have the most understanding of their clients' journeys, those firms that are gearing and aligning their transformation efforts to support those client outcomes, I think, you know, are going to succeed, right? Because no matter how long, you know, it may take you a little bit longer to get there, you may make a wrong turn along the way, but you've got your North Star, which is my customer, their journey, their outcomes. And if you're very focused on that, I think you're at least going in the right direction. And then I think beyond that, what I'd like to see in financial services firms is just, you know, more moonshot projects, right? So like, let's be a little less constrained in our ambition. We know we have to deal with lots of daily demands, lots of regulatory demands, lots of other competing demands, but, you know, more moonshots that are directed at sort of improving those client outcomes, I think, is the way to go.
What a great message. Directional guidance and organizational agility, which is really the heart of what you discussed with us today. Sanjiv Nathwani and Sanjiv Agrawal, what a pleasure and what a gift to all of us to have leaders in financial services with your track record and expertise share that expertise with us. Thank you so much for sharing those insights and practical perspectives with our global audience today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, two great leaders in financial services, transformation leaders, innovation leaders, who understand the strategy, operations, and the theory and the practices of transforming financial services at scale. So what a gift for all of us, a wonderful way for kicking off our BTOES Financial Services Live Conference. And I'm gonna wrap up the session, and at the top of the hour, I'm gonna welcome another fantastic transformation leader, the Director of Transformation from Fiserv, Niloufar Darbari, is going to be with us, and Niloufar is going to talk about orchestrating change, key insights on driving successful global multicultural transformation initiatives. This is the whole enchilada, okay? We're gonna see change at its greatest level, take into account a global audience, take into account a multicultural perspective on implementing change. So you do not want to miss that. I'll see you all back at the top of the hour. Thank you.